So one of the reasons why I keep reiterating this is so when you guys are explaining this information to people, you do not forget this real proven history and let people, interject their false Bible history. You got to understand what took place and that we got this inception of the Bible with the Greeks. Plain and simple. So you have the letters of Orestes, as I talked about. You have the Hebrew law being converted into Greek by the 72 Hebrew elders from the 12 tribes of Israel at the command of Ptolemy II Philadelphus. So already established, that is out there. So again, you have the inception of the book beginning with the Greeks and the Septuagint. Plain and simple. There's nobody nowhere that can prove anything prior to that as having a biblical manuscript before this point. And it was given to us by the Greeks. So that's laid out. That's another thing that is established. So now we got to move forward and look at that history as I already talked about. We're not going to go into all that and really get up to the point where everything is starting to really, take place, where you have Rome basically coming in and conquering, and then you have them basically continuing Hellenization for a very important reason. Now we know that reason was because of control, power. They had so many people under this influence of this religion that they continued that and the spreading of it, plain and simple. So again, you just ask yourself the simple basic question: if Hellenization, because you're going to have this argument, if Hellenization was about the Greeks spreading all this, Zeus religion and, all this Greek mythology religion or what have you, how come it didn't stick throughout, any of these countries? In fact, you have Judaism that did stick because this is what they were spreading and not Egyptian or Greek mythology, I should say. So they continued it to keep the power going, to keep that going, because they had their own plans, obviously. And the reason why we have Christianity later, as I said, is because that backfired with the whole war, the Jewish war. So it's not a coincidence that we have, the Greeks and the original Torah written in Greek, not Hebrew. As I said, we never found the Hebrew Torah or what have you. So we have that in Greek with the Septuagint, as well as the Old Testament, New Testament being in Greek as well because of the Greeks. So you have one of the key pieces to this whole puzzle is Dr. Joseph Yehuda's book, Hebrew is Greek, on how he proved that the Greeks created the Hebrew language. So I'm going to read from this here. It says, Mr. Yehuda claims that overwhelming evidence proves conclusively that Biblical Hebrew is camouflaged Greek. Biblical Hebrew is camouflaged Greek in grammar as well as vocabulary, and that by and large the difference between them is a matter of pronunciation. So much so that the Hebrew cannot be properly understood except through Greek, and that Greek may be better understood through Hebrew. The camouflage or mask, which conceals the identity of Hebrew with Greek, has a code, and Mr. Yehuda has broken the cipher and formulated rules of decoding, the accuracy of which can be tried over and over again. And that means when you keep doing it, it's going to keep giving you the same result. Stripped of this camouflage and allowing for differences of pronunciation, the words of both languages reveals their identity with each other. And the result, many obscure words and puzzling passages become clear, and the biblical vocabulary is vastly enriched. It emerges from his vast and meticulous physiological research that the Hebrews were of Hellenic descent. Now he would say that because of this language, meaning that they had to be some kind of Greek, Hellenic descent, and that they were both intimately related to the Greeks by religion and custom, that the traditional segregation of the Indo-European from the so-called Semitic languages is baseless, that a considerable revision of our amount of the Jewish and Arab people is required, and that the Jewish, Christian, and Islamic cultures, the triple pillars of modern civilization, have a common Hellenic foundation. And as I said, he has also proven that Arabic as well was created by the Greeks. Clear as day, their foundation begins with Greek. And one of the things, I've been talking about this book for years, and if you have a copy, you lucky because they are gone. Go and try to find you a copy right now. Remember, I was showing you pictures before of this book, being on Amazon for sale, and how it had rose from $700 all the way up to $7,000 before now it disappeared. Somebody has meticulously went out, searched through the internet, and bought every single copy because I had links to other books. Luckily for me, I got myself 2 copies before they're gone now. You can't buy a copy. Find a copy, see if you can buy one. You can't find one unless it's in a university library probably. They probably won't have all the pages. So there's a reason why they got rid of this book the same way they got rid of many other books, because they don't want people having that information. The information is out there, and it's the truth, and it's 100% proven that the Greeks created the Hebrew language as well as Arabic. So when we get into the why of it all, what I'm trying to express to you in these videos is to understand that the reason why they created Judaism was to basically change the spiritual beliefs of the African people in ancient Kemet and in the land that we know today as Israel, which, as I said before, was a part of ancient Egyptian territory. So this is why it was done. You can see that the ancient Egyptians understood and knew, what the Greeks was talking about, what they were about, and the fact that they were being taught by, the ancient Egyptians in the mystery schools. So anything that they tried to pass along to these people, they already understood to be false. So again, through indoctrination, starting with the young, they started to spread this doctrine to get the people to go out and spread it. But this was the point and purpose of it, was to change the spirituality of these people. So you fast forward to Rome coming in power, Rome continuing Hellenization, as I said, and you have a lot going on. So Rome basically did what we see these corporations doing today with business. They created their own competition. So you have Pepsi creating Mountain Dew, and you have Coca-Cola and Pepsi creating all these other soft drinks and juices or what have you. They created their own competition. That way nobody can jump in there and try to compete with them, and bring the market up against their product. They created their own competition. So anybody who tries to come in and compete has to not only deal with the main brand, but with all these other competitors. So this is what they did. So you have the Roman Church, you have them coming up with Christianity. And we know, forget what it says biblically about Christianity and how it started. No matter where you look, plain and simple, if it wasn't for Rome, Rome is responsible for the spreading and everything that we see with the inception of Christianity and how big it became. They took the Greeks, Septuagint Greek, and put it into their Vetus Latina. Plain and simple. There is no Vetus Latina without the Septuagint Greek, which the Vetus Latina contains the Old Testament and the New Testament. We don't get these codexes. We don't get the Latin Vulgate. We don't get none of these books without the Greek Septuagint. Plain and simple. So the fact that they had the whole thing in their Vetus Latina should tell you something. They continue Hellenization, which is the spreading of this doctrine. And then you move forward. What do we see next? We see so much influence, Rome and the rise of their power. So much influence they have with many different civilizations and people. We see Pope Leo X, basically with the whole forgiveness for sins thing. Basically, people trying to buy their way into heaven. He had this whole campaign going on where he was basically selling indulgences, giving people the opportunity to basically buy their soul into heaven, or buy someone who's passed soul into heaven or out of purgatory or what have you. This is what was going on. So you had a lot of people looking at the church and saying, you know what, this isn't right. By this point in time, you had the Christianity spread so well, and you had so many people believing in the doctrine so much that they began to question Rome and say, you know what, how can you guys be really about the book when you basically follow nothing from it? You're not following what the book is really about. So you have the Europeans look up and basically see Rome, conquering and raping and pillaging and committing all these crimes against the Bible, yet they're supposed to be the authority on the religion. In fact, they're going out basically teaching basically against what they're actually doing, and the people are seeing that, and they're they questioned the Pope and his actions and everything that, they was doing, especially when you have a Pope that's basically selling indulgences and selling sin, basically saying that if you pay this money, you can get into heaven, you can sin, you can do what have you. And the simple fact that, one, that you got to go through them to get to God was something that people was just like, come on, what's going on here? This is why you had a lot of wars going on around that time between the Europeans, because the Pope was sending the Knights Templars and sending their armies out there to wipe out these, pre-Protestant, towns and people who was talking against the Pope. They was getting them out of there. So, they had a lot of different ways that they was spreading this book. And a lot of people was picking up on the fact that it just wasn't fitting right with what Rome was doing. So this is why we had the Geneva Bible basically come out and call the Pope the Antichrist. And you had a lot of people subscribe more to the Geneva Bible than any other of the other books. Once you have, you go back to the beginning, you look at John Wycliffe. Back in the 14th century, basically was one of the biggest, people against Rome and organized churches. So he basically said that the Roman Catholic Church was, bullshit, because they was basically not really giving us a true interpretation of what the book was about. We had to basically go about what they were saying, and if it wasn't a proper translation, then how could we really know what the truth was? So this is one of the reasons why he did a translation. Now it says here, the first handwritten English language Bible manuscripts were produced in the 1380s AD by John Wycliffe, an Oxford professor, scholar, and theologian. Wycliffe was well known throughout Europe for his opposition to the teachings of the organized church, which he believed to be contrary to the Bible. With the help of his followers, called the Lollards, and his assistant Purvey, and many other faithful scribes, Wycliffe produced dozens of English language manuscript copies of the scriptures. They were translated out of the Latin Vulgate, which was the only source text available to Wycliffe. The Pope was so infuriated by his teachings and his translation of the Bible into English that 44 years after Wycliffe had died, he ordered the bones to be dug up, crushed, and scattered in the river. It says one of Wycliffe's followers, John Huss, actively promoted Wycliffe's idea that people should be permitted to read the Bible in their own language, and they should oppose the tyranny of the Roman Church that threatened anyone possessing a non-Latin Bible with execution. Huss was burnt at the stake in 1415, with Wycliffe's manuscript Bible used as kindling for the fire. The last words of John Huss were that in 100 years God will raise up a man whose calls for reform cannot be suppressed. Almost exactly 100 years later, in 1517, Martin Luther nailed his famous 95 Theses of Contention, a list of 95 issues of heretical theology and crimes of the Roman Catholic Church, into the church door at Wittenberg. The prophecy of Huss had come true. Martin Luther went on to be the first person to translate and publish the Bible in the commonly spoken dialect of the German people, a translation more appealing than previous German biblical translations. Fox's Book of Martyrs records that in the same year, 1517, 7 people were burnt at the stake by the Roman Catholic Church for the crime of teaching their children to say the Lord's Prayer in English rather than Latin. So, I went through this before, and the point in bringing this up again, a lot of people already know about this, but the point in bringing this up is to get people to understand, one, you have people questioning Rome and the Pope about what they're doing and not really being really critical about everything else. So if you have Rome being the authority that gave us the book, and then they themselves going against the book, what does that tell you about the book itself? If they are the ones who gave us the book and pushed the book, and everything we know about the Bible biblically came from them, there's no other source we can get it from. You can go with the lies that they told, but still they're the ones who compiled the books and did everything to bring the books together. People were using the Latin Vulgate, as I said, John Wycliffe, that's where he got his source from. So even if you do a translation, you're doing a translation from what they gave you. So if these people are questioning the people who gave you the book, how do you not question the book itself? So the simple fact that if God of the Bible was real, in Rome, here you have so many people accusing Rome of basically going against the book. You have the Geneva Bible calling them the Antichrist. How can these people remain in power if the God of the Bible is real? And these people are the ones who gave it to us. These are the people who are basically going out and controlling the doctrine and controlling the religion. So as you've seen, nobody else was allowed to translate the book into any other language. So there you have the proof that Rome is controlling the book, controlling the religion. Yet no one questions the religion itself. They only question Rome. And these are the people who gave it to you. So that should tell you right then and there something is up. But can't be right, because God is not punishing these people. In fact, they're going out and conquering and getting stronger and stronger. And it's not a coincidence that you read in Romans that it says clear as day that the powers that be were ordained by God, that God put these people in power. The authority figures was put in power by God. And here you have Rome being in power. So you have many people out there basically seeing through Rome and seeing what was going on. But again, not really asking the questions of, if we're questioning Rome, then we have to question the Bible. Not really looking into that point. So we have many people, talking about the fact that they're going around preaching this, but doing that, so on and so forth. But of course, they got their hands into a lot of kingdoms, and they were basically following this Christian doctrine, and it became the popular thing to do, to where, of course, it spread to the Europeans and, of course, to England. And you had, once these English translations began, remember, John Wycliffe wrote his before the printing press. So he had his done and written out a bunch of different copies before the printing press by Johann Gutenberg. So those copies, was out there. And you had then, after the printing press, you had with the Geneva Bible all the criticisms, citations in the book that was funny, things that was challenging the church, challenging Rome, calling the Pope the Antichrist, stuff like that. So, fast forward a little bit to King Henry VIII, as I talked about before, how that whole thing came about. King Henry VIII basically being mad at the Pope for not granting him a divorce from his wife, so he basically can marry his mistress or what have you. And he wanted a divorce supposedly because she couldn't give him a son, an heir to the throne. And because of this, he basically got mad and kicked Rome out of the English Empire, as far as them having their hands in any religious part.